So let's look at the chart. Let's look at, if you were to go along with this foolish and fraudulent approach, let's see what would actually happen. Look at the name Heru, the deity Heru. And of course, many of our people had that name in ancient Khanit and Kamit, and some of our people have that name today. When people have, when people are culturally grounded and so forth, and they give their children proper names, they don't name them after slave so-called masters and so forth. They learn about the culture, give their children names like Heru, Ra, or different names and so forth. So whether we were talking about ancient times and somebody had the name Heru, even when the Greeks invaded and then they learned about Heru and Asar and Aset and Ma'at and so forth, whether it was ancient times somebody had the name Heru, or today, if you had the name Heru, you gave your child the name Heru and so forth, and you were born during a time when people were studying ancient Kemet in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, you were born and so forth, and you were given the name Heru and so forth. And someone said, well, you need to look at your life path number and so forth. You need to break down your name numerologically so you can understand who you are in this world. Heru was corrupted into Horus by the Greeks, just like Asar became Osiris and Aset became Isis and so forth. Heru became Horus. And hold on a second. And then in English, Horus becomes Horus. So when you look at the English name Horus, it's a corruption of and a replication of the Greek version Horus, which is a corruption of Heru. Now let's prove that first and foremost. If you look at the name Horus, boy, origin Latin, from the Latin name Horatius, which is from the Latin root hora, meaning time or season. The root of the name Heru, Her and Heru, is the name of the divinity. So we know about that divinity and so forth. He is called Shango in Yoruba. He's called Hevioso or So in Vodun. He is called Yao, but he's also called Chere in Akan, and Chere is how we pronounce Here, as well as Heru in ancient Kemet is Chere in Akan and so forth. That's the same divinity. Ancient sky divinity. His right eye was the sun, his left eye is the moon. Of course, when you study the culture properly and you get the real information, Her or Heru is you find that Her or Heru is the male divinity, and Herit, it says the female counterpart of Horus. In the pyramid text of Teti, the T means Teti, the P, Pepi, the M, Mer in Ra, and the N is Neferkara, Pepi the second, and so forth. In the various pyramid texts, Heru texts, you will find the male divinity Heru, Her or Heru. You will find the female divinity Herit, the counterpart of Heru. If you've been studying ancient Khanit and Kemet culture and so forth, studying cosmology, and people have been talking about Heru and different divinities, and they never talked about Herit, the female divinity, the feminine falcon, then they've been misinforming you all along. So, but when you look at the term Her or Heru, right eye is the sun, left eye is the moon, and cosmologically, that goes back to the story when you look at the sorrows of Aset and so forth, and different stories, they talk about how Ra, story of Ra and Aset and so forth, you will learn about how Ra gave his eyes, the sun and the moon, to Heru once Heru became ruler. So, but when you look at the general term Heru, this is the H symbol for the H, the open mouth for the R, and the little chick for the U, Heru. And then the circle with the dot in the middle is the solar disk, and it represents the day. So the word for day in ancient Kemet is Heru. That's a symbol or representation of time. So Heru, you'll see day. Then different versions of that, today, every day and night, and so forth. And you see the sun and the moon together, day and night, and so forth, representative. And then you have related terms. Heru, up, renpet. The day, Heru, up, that opens, renpit or renpet, the year. The day of the opening of the year, meaning New Year's Day. Heru, uchat, medu. Heru, the day. Ucha, the weighing, medu, of the words, or the watching of the words, the weighing of the words, and so forth. That's the day of judgment, when the heart is placed against the feather, and so forth. Heru mit, the day of death, like the funerary piece, and so forth. Heru mostu, the birthday, day, Heru, and mostu, moset means to give birth, and so forth. So that's the day of birth. And you have a number of different days of birth of different divinities, and so forth. Heru in Anmutef, a name of the 19th day of the month. Heru an Ahi, a name of the 18th day of the month. So as you can see, Heru means day. It represents a segment of time, one of the basic units of time. Now, if you go back up, Heru became Horu and Horus and so forth, corrupted into Horus in English. But when they talk about from the Latin Horatius, which is from the Latin hora, meaning time or season, you can see Heru became Horu, and hora, meaning time or season. That is also the origin of the term hora or hour. And if you look at the origin of the term hour, Old French hore, from Latin hora, which means an hour. Poetically, time of year, season. From Greek hora, a word used to indicate any limited time within a year, month, or day. So the reason why they use the term hora, meaning a segment of time, whether it's a year, a month, or a day. And in the context of ancient Kemet, they learned that the term hora means day, or Heru means day, and they pronounced it Horu, meaning day, and later hora, meaning day or a segment of time. So in Latin, it becomes hora, meaning a day. If you look at the Proto-Indo-European quote-unquote root, yora, meaning yor, year, a season, and so forth, but a time period that comes from hora, or Horu, or Heru in ancient Kemet. So when you look at that, we just show that to show that when you go through the etymology, of course, Horus comes from Horus, comes from hora, which is hour, but hora, Heru, the hour, the solar disk, when the solar disk appears, 12 hours of the day, the solar disk disappears, 12 hours of the night, and then you have a brand new day, that's a 24-hour period, and so forth. And that's a segment of time, and the sun regulates the time, regulates the season, and so forth. So when you have the term Horu and the solar disk representing the regulation of days and nights and weeks and seasons, a time period. Second. And then you have the divinity Heru, whose right eye is the sun, the left eye is the moon. That's day and night, regulating the times and the seasons. So we show all of that to show, of course, that Heru or Horu, Horus, Horus, and so forth. That's the key. Now, when we get back to their Pythagorean numerology chart, let's calculate the times. We're going to look at the times, look at the numbers, look at the values associated with the letters, and see what happens. So if you look at the name Heru, as you can see, H is 8, E is 5, and we can understand what the vocalization between H and R is. In the Akan language, it's chere, so it's her or here in ancient Kemet, chere. in Akan. We find that in Chere for the name of the divinity, as well as Chet-Che in ancient Kemet for Het Heru or Het Her. So we have both Chet-Che and Akan, that's the female divinity, fertility, sensuality, and so forth. Title of Afi or Afu and so forth. Her name is Chet-Che. That is the same as Het Her in ancient Kemet. And so we understand the proper vocalization. It's not Horu or Hiru or Haru or He or Huru and so forth. We know that it's still spoken today in the Kan language, invoking the same deity by the same name. The E is a proper vocalization. So H, 8, E is number 5, R is 9, U, of course, is 3, 8 plus 5. Okay, so 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 9 is 22, plus 3 is 25, and then 2 plus 5 is 7. So if you were following Pythagorean numerology and you wanted to give your, associated with your life path, quote unquote, number, they would say, oh, your sacred number is 7. If you utilize the corruption of the name Heru and its Horus, which some of our people actually do that because they didn't study the culture. 8 plus 6 is 14, plus 9 is, 23, plus 3 is 26, plus 1 is 27, 2 plus 7 is 9. So you have a different life path number. And then if somebody took on the English name Horace, which a number of our people do, famous Horace Grant, who played with the Chicago Bulls and so forth, alongside Pippen and Jordan and so forth. H-O-R-A-S-E. If somebody's named Horace, 8 plus 6 is 14, plus 9, 23, plus 1 is 24, plus 3 is 27, plus 5 is 32, and then 3 plus 2 is 5. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so question in the chat room. So no, we shouldn't be using the Pythagorean quote unquote numerological system at all because it's nonsense. Like we shouldn't be using Chaldean or any of these quote unquote numerological systems because they're fraudulent from the base, not only with the letters, with the numbers and so forth, but even the values associated with the numbers. They have nothing to do with any divinity. So it's misinformation from the gate, period. It's not a tool at all because any number you arrive at, as we're going to see, when they give values to these numbers, where did they get the values from? They misrepresent the values anyway because it's not associated with the divinity. But now let's get into the other piece. And you'll hear people talking about Islam is mathematics and mathematics is Islam because they were studying Pythagorean numerology, misinformation, and gematria and so forth, and they really don't know what they're studying. So people in the Nation of Islam and other forms of Islam and so forth, pretending like they have a sacred science that only the higher level people can study, and they start talking about numbers and they think that's deep, pure nonsense, pure foolishness. Now, they talk about the monad. This is their science of numbers from 1 through 10. And this is where they get their values for the numbers. And we'll show you if they say, well, your life path number is 1. And we already saw if you have a real name, an Afurakani name, Heru, and the sacred number is, ends up being quote unquote 5 according to their system. And then Horus is 9 and so forth. And your name Horus, a corruption of an ancient name, then you don't have a life path number. You have a slave path number. If your last name is Reynolds, if you're James Reynolds and so forth, and you're adding up James, J-A-M-E-S and Reynolds, and you put these numbers together, that's not a life path number. You're named after a slave master, a so-called slave master. That's a slave path number. You're getting a number that has nothing to do with you. It's pure stupidity. Now, the monad signifies